welcome back to Thursday night Lake Fork Bass Fishing Top Baits Live, like we do each and every Thursday, coming to you, bringing you the best baits to hopefully help you catch more and bigger fish this weekend, because that's just kind of what we like to do here at your Lake Fork Guide. I apologize for being a little bit late tonight. What can I say? I'm just late to everything. I really don't have an explanation at this point. You know, I've just got to be better. I'll try to suck less next week, but for now, it is what it is. And you've come to expect that around here if you know me very well at all. But thank you guys for joining us tonight. We're going to give you the best bait selections for this weekend, man. Hey, do me a favor as you guys are getting in here. Y'all go ahead, hit that thumbs up. If you enjoy these live streams that we do each and every week, hit those thumbs up. Drop me a comment so I know who I'm talking to. I see some of y'all doing that right now. Y'all continue to do that. Drop those comments so I know who it is that I'm talking to. And also, I'm not real smart. I don't really know how to do this. But if you know how to share this live stream while we're doing it, or even after, share this thing for me. I will greatly, greatly appreciate it. It'll help us out a bunch. Get some more people in here talking about fishing and loving our fellow man, because that's what we do here at your Lake Fork Guide. Cheers, y'all. It's Thursday night Top Baits Live. That's right. Let's say some hellos. Before we get into the baits tonight, we'll say some hellos and how you doing to the early risers, as we like to call them. The low ballers in the house. That's right, low ballers in the house. We got Rocky Shoe, David G, Brian Richardson, John Dendy, Brad Lamar, Express Jack, Michael Burnside, Dusty Smith, Fishing with JC, Big L, Bustin' Outdoors, Jared Dyer, John Higginbotham. And I'm sure there will be many more of you guys commenting as we continue to go. We're early in the stream still. We're early. Brian Richardson said the buzz bait is hot in South Kakalaki. That's a fun bite to be on, ain't no doubt. Man, I've been honestly, most of my fishing's been, you know, offshore stuff, main lake oriented stuff, deeper water, not always just real deep, but a little bit of medium to deep stuff. Finally starting to get some of those fish grouped up in the typical areas that we're used to fishing this time of year, which is nice to finally have some of that going on. Are they biting a big spoon yet? Caught a few on PK a month ago on one. I haven't been throwing a big spoon a whole lot. We're going to get into the baits we're throwing here in just a minute. I'm going to try and talk about the general fishing stuff and give a little more time for a few more folks to get into the stream here, into the chat, into the stream before we get going on the baits. Because when I do it real early with the baits, everybody always asks me later in the stream what the baits were. So we'll try to hesitate on that for just a minute. But it's been main lake fishing. You can catch some fish shallow. It's, you know, Lake Fork is such a cool lake, and really all of our East Texas fisheries in this area, North Texas fisheries in this area, they're fertile enough, the vast majority of them, that you're going to have a population of fish that's going to live shallow year round. You're going to have a population of fish that's going to be mainly deeper offshore fish pretty much year round. So there's really never a time where you can't do both or either one that you want to. So by all means, if you're a shallow water dog and you're a grinder, you can definitely go catch fish shallow on Lake Fork. It's not something I've personally been doing very much at all, but it is definitely there to be had. And really, guiding is so much different than fishing. So when I'm guiding, it's a lot easier for me to pull up on offshore fish, graph them, know where they're sitting, tell my customers, hey, cast right there, drag this Carolina rig, drag this shaky head, whatever may have you, whatever bait we're choosing that day. But it's just a lot easier customer fishing when you're out there offshore and throwing baits at a school of fish, making the same cast. You know what you're dragging the baits through. It just makes things a lot easier versus if we're going along fishing up shallow and we got some grass to flip and some grass to work our baits through, and we got docks to skip under and, you know, timber here and there, and you kind of moving, the boat's moving, so the guy's hung up behind your boat, now you got to go back and get the bait. Like, it's a lot easier fishing offshore than it is fishing up shallow with customers. So I like catching fish offshore. I also feel like, you know, at times that's, don't get me wrong, I will guide up shallow year round. You guys that watch this channel for years know I probably fish shallow in the summertime more than anybody does in years past, not so much this year. But I also feel like right now on Lake Fork, the way to catch them the best is offshore, period. I mean, if I felt like the way to catch them best was shallow, and we could catch them better up shallow, we'd be up there. There's also always with that offshore deal, there is an element to that true offshore deeper water bite where the possibility of the mega school, the possibility of a big group of fish being out there where you catch them fast and just do things that you just don't see any other time of year. That really exists better offshore than it does shallow. It'll get like that. Shallow at times will group up in channels and drains and ditches. But the more realistic possibility of that happening is definitely offshore, if that makes sense. So I enjoy fishing offshore. I know in years past I've kind of become known as a shallow water guy. It's kind of a little bit of a misleading about me because I really do like fishing offshore. And this year I'm getting a chance to do plenty of it because it really has been the better bite for a lot of this year. And it's been so weird how we've had some of these fish are just, over the years you get these little sweet spots on these offshore structures on Lake Fork and you're like, okay, well in June they get out here on this part of this deal and they really sit up on this one particular sweet spot, hard spot, shell bed, whatever it may be. And then this year it hasn't really lined up with normal seasonal patterns because we've talked about it all year, how the water temps have been behind, yada, yada, yada. But we're finally getting some of those fish to those normal summer haunts where those sweet spots that have paid off in years past are starting to pay off again. That makes things a lot easier for a dude that's been fishing there for a lot of years like myself, where you know where they should be. And when they line up with that, that's a lot easier than having to find them all over the structure. It just makes things a lot more efficient, a lot simpler. I'm on stuff now where I don't even graph them anymore. Like, all year long, I've pretty much had to graph the fish to feel confident about fishing that area before I fished it. Now we've kind of gotten to the point where we're just pulling up on that point and casting, and we're catching them. And if we don't, we move on. But we know where they're coming to, where they're going to be, where they're setting up. So the offshore bite's getting more consistent by the day, it seems like. So let's get into some baits, man. I appreciate you, like I said, appreciate you guys joining us. Hit those thumbs up. Drop us a comment so we know who we're talking to. And if you know how to do it, share this sucker. Share it. Let's get it. Sharing is caring, folks. It helps me out. I really do appreciate it if you share it. So cheers, y'all. Top baits for Thursday. I'm gonna answer this question before we start. I'm gonna answer this comment before we start moving on in the deal, because this is a pretty good one here. Eric Washington says, I need a guide for double-digit bass. Bro, that is so unrealistic, man. Some people show up to Lake Fork with such unrealistic expectations. A 10-pound bass is special, really special. Jack York has been on a hell of a run this year. He's caught more of them than everybody else for sure this year. But the majority of his customers are not catching 10-pound bass. Like, it's not an everyday thing. It's not even close to an every week thing. It's really not an every month thing. Some years, if you really get on a run, like some of these guys with this live scope are starting to kind of, Jack's one of those guys, are starting to kind of change that, where they're catching more double digits than we have in the past. With the guys that are getting really good with this live imaging sonar stuff. But man, to show up on a trip and like that's your thing, I want to catch a 10-pound. Well, you can book a guide. A good guide's going to give you as good a shot as you can have at catching a 10-pound bass. But to show up expecting a 10-pound bass, with all due respect, is absolutely ludicrous. There's no reason to do that because, I mean, there's guys, some of the best fishermen in the world, that are tournament anglers that are huge. I mean, they're some of the best in the world. They've never caught a 10-pound bass in their life. Now, down here where we live, that possibility is obviously a lot more prevalent. But showing up expecting, it's good to have that goal, but to think you're going to hire a guide and that's going to put you on 10-pound bass, it's not a realistic expectation, brother. I cannot say your name. Somebody's got a pretty unique screen name and he wants me to say his name, but I can't say it because even though you spelled it different, it ain't going to sound different when I say it, dog. I can't say it. Let's talk about our top baits. So you guys saw it on the video content this week. The crankbait bites starting to get here, man. You get on the right points, got a good school fish on them, you can catch them on a crankbait. And this is the color I've been using, the chartreuse blueback. It's got a white belly on it. Not real sure what that color is called. That is the C20. The C20 has been the one that I've been throwing the vast majority of the time. Every once in a while we'll throw a C25 out there. But C20 has been the crankbait that we've been throwing the most in my boat. Deep diving crankbait bite has finally started happening. Really excited about that. When I can't get them going on deep diving crankbait, my main bait that, you know, we've talked about this bait a lot this year, but it's still going strong. Carolina rig. This is the one I've been throwing. This is what I've been throwing on the Carolina rig the most. This is the hog walleye from 6 Sense Fishing. Of course, that C20 is from 6 Sense Fishing. You're about to see the ridge worm. You're about to see a hybrid jig. Most of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight is from 6sensefishing.com. And if you go to 6sensefishing.com and order these baits, be sure you punch in the code, Your Lake Fork Guide. You'll get a 10% discount on all orders. But what's this color called? This is Cali Magic Red. It's kind of a dark green on one side, a lighter green on the other. And it's got some red and gold and silver flake. Just really, really good Carolina rig bait. It's been we're still catching some on the fluke style baits, the flush and the impact shaft, but the majority of our Carolina rig fish lately have been coming on the hog walleye. C20 stock hooks are changed. These are stock hooks on my C20. One thing I love about 6 Sense Fishing is their baits come ready to go out of the box. I mean, the crankbaits, you don't really hardly ever have to tune a crankbait. Every once in a while, hardly ever have to tune a crankbait. The hooks, the split rings, everything on them is perfect. Like, it's ready to go. And these are absolutely the best hooks you can put on them. So no, do not change the hooks on the C20 or any of the crankbaits from 6 Sense. They do a very good job of being particular about which hooks they put on which crankbaits and only using like really good quality hooks. Tim Rhodes says, do you still throw your big plugs with a broomstick and 20-pound line? Yeah. I throw it on an 8-foot heavy. It's got a moderate tip. It's got some tip to it. It's not exactly a broomstick. Tim's my old tournament partner. He knows how to do everything pretty much. It's not just a broomstick. There's some tip to it. I throw it on the Lux Series, 6 Sense Lux Series, 8-foot heavy, and it's got that moderate tip, so it does have some tip on the end of it, but yeah. So Carolina rig, deep diving crankbait, the jig, especially if you get around some timber, especially that standing timber on Lake Fork, the jig's starting to play a good role for me. I've been throwing this Mexican crawl or whatever this color is right here. It's got chartreuse and green pumpkin and purple and man, just a bunch of stuff. Pairing it with a stroker crawl and sprayed grass and pitching that in the timber, casting it out around the timber and just really kind of almost fishing that vertical around the timber is how I'm getting my jig bites on Lake Fork. Is throw it out there and kind of let it fall beside the tree. I try to actually hit the tree, and a lot of times I'm using my Lowrance Active Target to see the tree, see the fish sitting on it, and let that jig fall beside the tree as close as I can to it. And that's really how, and then dragging it up over limbs and trees. Like when you're dragging it up over limbs, a lot of times as you're dragging it up, they're biting that jig as you're dragging it over limbs, or as soon as it falls over a limb, they'll hit it. So really fishing that big 3/4 ounce jig in standing timber more than anything else. And another thing that we're doing the same way is the ridge worm. The ridge worm's it's really good some days and some days not, but I think it just depends on what cover they're in. If we're finding them in the open water stuff, then it's like the Carolina rig and the crankbait's doing a lot better. If we find them in the timber and the brush piles, then the jig and the ridge worm are doing better. But the old ridge worm, 10-inch, big, crazy looking thing. It's got kind of a weird tail to it, but it's a unique bait. It has unique action to it in the water, and they bite the heck out of it. I'm rigging that on a 1/4 ounce Texas rig is the bait is the weight that I'm using on my ridge worm. And today we actually went to a different lake today, and you guys will see it on camera on Monday. And sure enough, the jig and the ridge worm, the 10-inch Texas rig worm, were the key deals for us today. That's what we caught pretty much all of our fish on today. But brush piles and timber can be really, really good. Was that Cosmic Black? I don't know what they call this on their website. We call this blurple around here. That is, it's got blue flake. It's black with blue flake, but it also has purple. I don't know if the purple's really showing up. It's not showing up. But that's purple right there, and then that's black. So it's got black, blue, and purple. So we just call that blurple where I come from. But anyway, the old blurple worm. And we actually threw a blurple jig today too and caught them on that. So we had a really good day today. I mean, we went to, like I said, we went to a different lake. We filmed. You guys will see it Monday. I took a guy that's a friend of mine out. He's really just kind of getting into bass fishing. He's not just super experienced by any means yet. In fact, he hadn't caught very many big fish. And we had a crazy moment today when we doubled up on some fish, and these fish crossed our lines, and our lines got wrapped up. And so my fish is at the boat, and we're trying to land it, but his fish is like over here going around the motor and doing all kinds of great. it was his new PB, and he ended up, we couldn't, our lines got wrapped around each other and locked up when we got my fish to the boat. So I just had to grab both rods, and I'm holding both rods, and I got a fish hanging off one of them. He reaches down, grabs the line, past where it's hung up on my line at, and literally hand lined in his new personal best. So it was a heck of a double up. It was like a 6 pound and change fish and a 5 pound fish that we doubled up on. So really cool double up, really fun moment. It was cool. He was pretty happy about it. So it was an awesome moment. And you guys will get, that's the cool thing about the filming deal is you guys, videos we make, you guys are going to share in that moment on Monday. We'll be airing that video with that crazy catch. We had somewhere between 25 and 30 pounds on our best 5 today, so we had a really good day. I mean, you can never complain about a day. When you catch 25 pounds, I don't care what lake you're on, like you may get your butt kicked on some lakes with 25 pounds, but you go out and catch 25 pounds, if you're complaining about that, you probably need to look for a different game because that's a really good day. Those days don't happen every day, and we were fortunate to have a good one today. Those are the baits I'm using offshore. Now, I'm not fishing much up shallow like we talked about earlier. I'm sure there are better ways to catch them up shallow, but I will tell you this. When I'm up shallow, and I have done it just a little bit, when it gets, some of these days when it gets real cloudy and these storms are pushing in and out, boy, we got rain on the day. I'm throwing a 3/8 ounce white chatterbait. That's what I'm throwing. I either throw that or Beehive Delight, but I'm throwing a chatterbait around grass with a paddle tail trailer on it, and it just, man, that chatterbait's my confidence deal. It's what I feel good about throwing when especially when I'm around vegetation or anytime I'm shallow, really. Docks, it doesn't matter. Whatever, I just feel confident with that chatterbait. So I'm not spending enough time up shallow to really have that bite dialed in per se, or really I haven't spent enough time up there playing with different baits, seeing what they're biting best. But for me, I can go catch some fish. I can get bites up shallow on a chatterbait. In fact, I started this morning on the other lake up shallow, and the first fish today I caught a good one, about a 3 or 4 pounder, 3.5, 4 pound fish on a chatterbait right off the bat. Solid fish to start the day, but we didn't stay there very long. I don't know, man. I've been on an offshore kick, and like I said, I feel like the true potential for a bigger day where you have that home run scenario of catching one after another and them being big, it just is a better chance of that existing offshore. So we've been fishing mostly offshore. We did not stay shallow long at all. Even in the mornings, there's a lot of mornings, especially on Lake Fork, where, man, I'm just running straight to my first school of fish. I'm not even going shallow at all a lot of times. If it's slow offshore and I have the right conditions, like it's cloudy, it's a little bit cooler, there's some rain coming in, something like that, and I'm just not really catching them offshore, that's usually when I'll flip and go shallow for a while and check that out. But right now here lately, usually it turns out I go right back out deep because these clouds and stuff are rolling in then rolling out. And as soon as that sun comes out, especially if it's real hot, like if it's hot and the sun's out, but the wind's blowing a little bit, those are the best conditions for summertime offshore fishing. I don't like it when it gets slicked off calm. I have a hard time, to be honest with you. I have a major hole in my game in summer fishing. When it slicks off and gets dead calm and super hot, I suck. What happens is those fish will start suspending out off that structure a lot when the conditions are like that, slick and hot. And when they suspend out off that, I'm just not any good at catching those fish, man. I am terrible at catching those fish. I hate it when that happens in the middle of a guide trip because I know. And I'm honest with everybody. When we get those conditions, I look at my customers and say, boys, it's going to be tough. Like, I'm going to have a hard time. Every once in a while I'll catch some doing that, but in those conditions. But when it gets super hot and slicked off, I struggle as bad as I struggle with any conditions year round. Now, I don't know what it is about that I just can't quite get my grasp around, but it's a bad deal for me. I really like it being hot. I like it to be really hot this time of year because it groups the fish up better, but I need some wind. I need 5 to 10 mile an hour wind. We get that, we're going to catch them. Am I able to run active target and Mega 360 at the same time? Yes, I am. Yes, absolutely. Any idea when the big glide bait from 6 Cents is going to be released? I've heard late summer, early fall. You know how those things go. They can get pushed back a little bit. Dark water bug is the color. Dark water bug is the color. I call it blurple. It's got black, blue, and purple in it, but it's actually called dark water bug. That is the color on the 6th Sense website, if you're looking for it. What's my price on a guide trip? My price for a full day guide trip is $500 for 1 or 2 people. Same price either way, but $500 a day. Man, I know I missed some questions earlier. If you guys have some questions that I missed while I was going through my spiel, y'all just throw them back in there, and we will do our best to answer them. Does lightning strike hitting the water do anything to fish? I assume not, because you don't ever see any like bad after effects of it. Am I seeing most of these deep fish on active target? Some of them were just old school graphing. So, be honest with you guys, I've been without my active target for I think a little over a week now. My bracket on my transducer, I broke it. It's a new mount that we tried to build it. The guys at Nautical Mile worked on it for me. It's an experimental deal that I'm wanting to run, and they put it together for me, but it's not holding up to the rough water. It literally, the bracket is not holding up. So I'm actually without active target over the last week or two. Before that, yeah, I was looking at them on active target when I was fishing offshore, absolutely. Now, I'm just waiting. I'm actually taking my boat in the morning to get that bracket fixed, and I think we're just going to go back on the trolling motor shaft, unfortunately. But, yeah, I love active target. It's when you get it dialed in and figure out what they're biting, it feels a little bit like cheating at times. It literally at times feels a little bit like cheating. It's so good. Favorite jig rod offshore? Great question. I've got my other jig rod in the boat, I believe, that my customer was using today, or my guest was using today. It's my favorite jig rod. It's the Century series from 6 Sense Fishing, 7.7 heavy. Love that jig rod. Whether I'm putting a 1/2 ounce jig in a creek channel bend in the winter, whether I'm throwing a 3/4 ounce jig offshore, the 7.7 heavy Century series is the deal when it comes to throwing a jig. I love that rod. How windy can it be and your boat can just go through waves? Well, that depends on the lake. I mean, that really, really depends on the lake. If you're on Sam Rayburn or Toledo Bend, it's a whole different ball game with a 15-mile-an-hour wind than Lake Fork. Lake Fork, even if it's blowing 20, 25, I mean, I've only seen one time ever where Lake Fork got rough enough where you just really didn't need to be out there. Like, it was too dangerous to be out there. We got caught in a storm that the front line winds on the storm kind of wasn't forecasted, popped up, but the front line winds on the storm were 70-mile-an-hour winds. That stirred up Lake Fork in a way I've never seen it stirred up like that before. I saw 2 boats get sunk that day. One of them got tied up in a daggum marina boat slip. It was very dangerous out there. We were lucky enough in that Skeeter boat, it got us home, but man, we had to baby it like it sucked. We had water in the boat up to our ankles. I had a man and a woman from right here in Van. They were customers, but they were right here in Van, Texas, same town I live in, and it was a scary deal. But we got back in. But that's the only time I've seen Lake Fork get like that. Now, Toledo Bend, if it blows out the north or south, even blowing 10 to 15 miles an hour sustained, you're not going to want to go on that main lake. It gets, I mean, awful because that lake's so much bigger. If it rolls all the way out of the north or all the way out of the south, it's insane how bad it'll get. The good news is on those lakes, you can drive around and launch in creek arms. And hell, on Toledo Bend, they got creek arms as big as Lake Fork. So you got plenty of ways to get out of it and still fish. You just don't want to be driving down the main lake however you feel when you get those conditions. Sam Rayburn, same way. Same exact way on Sam Rayburn. Now, it lays kind of southeast to northwest. If it blows out of the southeast or northwest on Sam Rayburn, buddy, it is going to get nasty. And it don't take much. Like I said, a 10, 15-mile-an-hour sustained wind will make part of that lake basically unnavigable, or at least where it's going to beat the hell out of you if you do go out there. You have to take your time. So it's so big, it takes so long to get anywhere on Rayburn and Toledo. It seems like on Rayburn it takes longer to get places on Rayburn than it does on Toledo, even though Toledo's technically bigger. But Toledo's kind of longer and narrower, and Rayburn's kind of more broad. So yeah, Lake Fork doesn't really get too big to navigate if you have a big 20-foot plus bass fishing boat. Junior Figueroa, he said, "What's up, Lawless?" The sideshow Billy Lawless. What's going on, big dog? Appreciate y'all joining us. Texoma and Ray Roberts can get rough. Oh yeah, those are big lakes. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I may have told a player that too. Yeah, told a player that a time or two. Yeah, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. My drill instructor told me that in boot camp, actually. Guide service price, I think I gave that earlier, but it's $500 a day. One or two people, $500 a day. The Asian boy says, love that saw 'em off flag. Sooner fan here, but Texas A&M okay too. That's right. Saw 'em off, baby. Hell yeah. Shad color crank working? I haven't been, no. I've thrown one. I've thrown the Tennessee shad one and another one. It's like kind of like shad, shell cracker or something. It's a shad. It's like a white with a yellow stripe. But really the chartreuse and blue has been the deal for me. I haven't caught any on the shad pattern. Really, this is mostly what we've thrown. So they might bite a shad pattern. We just haven't thrown it a whole lot because kind of they started biting this. I threw a shad pattern one a little bit that day, and the next day I cut it off, tied another one of these on, and I haven't looked back. So maybe they are, and I just haven't fished with them enough to really know. But no, that chartreuse blue's been a deal in my boat. How to distinguish white bass from largemouth on sonar? Whew, that's a good question. That's a valuable. That's a handy piece of information to have. And what's Ron White say? Like, I didn't know how many guys it was going to take to whoop me in that bar, but I knew how many they were going to use. That's a handy piece of information to have. To be able to distinguish speed, I think that's one of the more advanced deals that people that have been on electronics for a long time are really good at, and people that are new to electronics are really bad at. People that are new to electronics, they see stuff down there and like, look at all those fish. Well, it doesn't matter if none of them are bass. If none of them are bass, it doesn't matter for what we're doing here, what we all are doing out bass fishing. So, to me, you really need to learn that. That's something you need to take time to learn. And I've talked about it at a seminar. Speaking of a seminar, we've got a free seminar tomorrow night, Lake Fork Marina, 6 p.m. Free seminar. Come on in, hang out with us. Ask all the questions you want to. Do it in person. Afterwards, at the old Gateway Bar and Grill, good friend of the channel, Billy Joe Jones, Billy Joe Music, is playing a show at Gateway that evening, and we're going to go over there. So if you guys want to come to the seminar tomorrow night, have a good time there. Once the seminar's over, about an hour and a half after that, we'll be at Gateway having a good time and enjoying some great music. So y'all want to come hang out with us tomorrow evening, be sure you stop by for that. Anyways, distinguishing species on sonar is really, really important. The easiest thing I can tell you is whether it's sand bass, yellow bass, or crappie, they will group up where if this is their arc, right? The arcs will be like intermingled on top of each other where they're just really, really tightly grouped. Bass will typically have space between the arcs. You know what? We'll pull up some old, how about we do this? How about we pull up some old sonar pics? And I haven't really taken many this year, but I've got some old ones here. Just give me a minute to find them. And we'll show you guys what bass look like on a sonar. One minute, boys. I got a lot of pictures in my phone. I got a stupid amount of pictures in my phone. Here's a really good one of largemouth bass. So y'all can see how there's kind of some space between those arcs. They're not just jumbled up together. I mean, a couple of them are on top of each other. Here's another one. See the spacing between the arcs? That's what you want to look for right there. And I don't typically take pictures of schools of sand bass on my graph. Maybe I need to do that, but Sand bass or white bass, they'll just be really, really tightly packed together. Sometimes sand bass will stack vertical. A lot of times though, sand bass, and especially yellow bass almost always, will be real tight, flat to the bottom, almost like carpet. And the yellow bass will be like carpet, and then the sand bass will be like shag carpet, just a little bit taller. But sand bass kind of do different shapes and schools. Typically, crappie tend to stack more vertically, especially, I mean, they like being around timber, crappie do, so, but they also tend to stack more vertically. But bass will be a little space in between them, and typically kind of in an oval type of shape. But the size of the arc is one thing, but you know, sometimes there's 3-pound bass and sometimes there's 3-pound sand bass. So sometimes the arcs can be the same size. So judging the spacing between them to me is the most important thing, and kind of learning the shape of how they like to school up. Somebody said, Judy Figueroa said, I just cast a jig and spoon. That's true. If you see something on your graph, if you want to find out if it's sand bass or not, if you throw a jig and spoon down there, if it's sand bass, you'll find out real quick. Them sand bass cannot handle a daggone jig and spoon. They just can't, they can't deal with it. Do white bass and largemouth group together and find a new spot? Do white bass and largemouth group together, or should you find a new spot when you catch a white bass? No. They will intermingle. Now, there's times when you'll see them on your graph and it's like all white bass, and then like right on the perimeters, you'll see like a few largemouth scattered on the outside edge of them. But yeah, there is plenty of times where I'm catching both. In fact, I had a fall tournament. God dang, this has been, I don't know, 7, 8, maybe 9 years ago. It's been a long one. 2021? Yeah, it's 7, 8, 9 years ago. But there was a fall tournament. It was just a small deal, a little fun deal. And we were actually, it was just a group of guys that kind of, most of us knew each other a little bit or whatever. We were measuring our fish, and we were counting inches so we could count slot fish for a fun tournament on Lake Fork. Some little $50 or $70 or $80 just open jackpot entry deal with some buddies. And decent little group of guys. I don't remember how many boats it was. I mean, it wasn't a whole bunch. It was like 10 or 15 or 20 boats or something like that. I don't remember what it was. But anyway, this was the second fall that the Alabama rig had kind of been a known thing in bass fishing. The first fall, it had really been a known deal on Lake Fork, you know, where we started fishing them the winter before. So this is really the first fall. And I was just hammering. The lake was real low. I was just hammering fish offshore in the fall on that Alabama rig. And it's funny because I was just started working with Chris Blackman back then, the guy that does a podcast with me. And Chris can verify this story if you ask him. But I was working with Chris on a Friday, and he was asking me about fishing. And I looked and told Chris, he was asking about fish, told him I had a tournament the next morning, whatever. I said, bro, I'm going to win that tournament. Like, I'm going to win it in like 30 minutes. Like, we're going to be done the first hour. We're going to quit. We ain't going to have to fish anymore. And just being cocky and arrogant as I could. Well, we did, though. But I knew, like, I had some fish on this Alabama rig deal. But what was cool about it, or kind of interesting about it, was we were throwing that Alabama rig out there, and you'd catch a sand bass or two on an Alabama rig, 1 or 2 at a time. And then you thought there the next cast you'd catch a sand bass, a largemouth, and a sand bass, or a largemouth and a sand bass, or 2 largemouth. Like, we were catching, literally bringing in on the same cast on an Alabama rig, bringing in sand bass and largemouth on an Alabama rig on the same cast. It happens all the time out there. In fact, I believe, while we're here, I can pull up another picture, because I believe that I have a picture from last May. I think it was. Here it is. So, do not hesitate to fish around sand bass, because there's 2 sand bass and a really big largemouth on one Alabama rig. And peep the Fish Life Tupac shirt if you would. Peep the Fish Life Tupac shirt. That's all I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? Are you still down? Yeah. Let's go. Don't catfish stack like bass too. Some catfish sometimes will, but usually they'll be bigger, man. You will be able to tell the difference in the arc size on. When you've got a school of catfish, there's going to be some big fish in there that are too big to be a bass. So you can kind of tell by that. The one thing that's really difficult, that really confuses me at times, is freshwater drum. Freshwater drum can make you think they're bass on a lake. They look identical on 2D sonar to a bass. So they're really hard to tell the difference between freshwater drum and a bass. Is there any decent grass in 5 to 8 feet? Not that I know of. Everything's shallower than 5 feet that I know of, or down to 5 feet around, give or take. There might be some somewhere on the lake. I can't cover every inch of it, so there might be some. How do you determine how to set up on fish on a point after you find them? Well, it's interesting you say that. I think that you should come to the seminar, because that is what I'm going to cover at the seminar on Friday, is going to be how to map out schools of fish and how to set up correctly on a school of fish on offshore structure. That's what we're going to do the seminar on tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. at Lake Fork Marina. If you can't be there, then the seminar will air in 2 parts. The first half will air this Saturday, the second half will air next Saturday. So it'll be coming up on a video. That is a really in-depth topic that I really don't want to try to explain to you with no visual aid on a live stream, but we're going to do that in the seminar tomorrow night. Do you adjust 2D sensitivity based off depth? What's a good starting sensitivity setting on a helix? I unfortunately do not know anything to speak of about the sensitivity of Humminbird, about Humminbird settings. Now, I can tell you what I run my 360 on, but I literally have a Humminbird graph on the front of my boat that I only use for 360. It never goes off the 360 screen. That's the only thing I even turn it on for. So when it comes to 2D sonar, Lowrance is just a better sonar. As far as adjusting the sensitivity setting based on the depth, no. We're fishing 20 foot or less 99% of the time around here, maybe 25 foot. That is not enough depth where you need to adjust your sensitivity because of the depth. Now, sometimes in extremely clear water or extremely dirty water, we do have to adjust sensitivity to get a clearer picture depending on water clarity in extreme conditions. But for the most part, in my experience, once I get my sonar set up, I get my sensitivity where I want it, I really do not have to tweak it after that around here. But I fish a lot of similar waters. Like I said, depths 20, 25 foot at the most. The only time you have to start adjusting sensitivity for depth is when you're fishing. You start getting out to, I don't even know, man. It's not anything that's realistic for me to worry about. But I guess if you got below 50 feet or something, you probably might have to start adjusting sensitivity for depth. It's just not something you have to do in 20, 25, 15 feet of water. What days do you guide on since you work full-time too? I'm a full-time fisherman, brother. I mean, I have the other aspects of my fishing business with the social media content. I got to go out and film. Like today, we went out and filmed today. I've got to do editing. I've got my app company. We have the Fish Life app, which is we're real proud of. It's done so awesome. We have the Fish Life app, and I have to kind of run that company behind the scenes. I got to do payroll and stuff like that. So I have office days where I have to stay home and work. But my full-time gig is fishing. It's guiding, filming content for videos for sponsors and for advertising and all that, and then managing the app company as far as just the little business stuff that nobody wants to talk about, a bunch of boring stuff. But no, I'm full-time in the fishing gig, have been since 2017. Been full-time fishing, so yeah, I don't do anything else. What days do I guide? It just depends on when the calls and the emails and messages come, the days that get booked first during the week. I do not guide on the weekends anymore. I spend the weekends with my kids when I can. I coach them in soccer in the spring and fall, and so I'm with my kids on the weekends pretty much year round. I rarely do anything on the weekends guiding or fishing wise. And I'd love to have you out in the fall. I love fall fishing. Peak of fall fishing is October 15th to Thanksgiving. That's the peak of fall fishing most of the time. There you go. Somebody helping you with the hummingbirds on a +2. He said he keeps his about +2 of the factory settings on his Humminbird for sonar sensitivity on fork. That's ironic. I run, I believe my Lowrance is set up at, you know, the auto sensitivity. I use auto +2 most of the time as well on Lowrance, so that's interesting. Is Old Bay Purdue? Yeah, Old Bay's had some fish in it all summer. I mean, there's fish up there. I'm not catching them as good up there as I was earlier in the year. That's kind of normal though. We're getting to the pretty extreme summer part of the year. All right, looks like we've gotten all caught up on questions, man. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Don't miss the seminar; it should be a good one. We're gonna have Cord Hutkins there, the guy you saw on video this week. It's gonna be his first time at one of our seminars. Cord's a new guy on Lake Fork. He's gonna be coming to. I don't know what he's gonna talk about yet. I gotta actually talk to him when I get off this, or maybe tomorrow because it's getting kind of late. But Cord's gonna be at our seminar tomorrow night. I'm gonna be discussing graphing and setting up on schools of fish offshore and boat positioning and how to map out your schools and really maximize your efforts on offshore schools of fish using your mapping on your sonar. And of course, after that, Billy Joe Music. The lady that played our concert for us at our registration, she's playing at Gateway right over there on Lake Fork. So we're going to go see her tomorrow evening, and we would love for as many of you guys that want to come on and hang out with us. We'll have a great time, man. Appreciate everything that you guys continue to do. I do get to live my dream full time because of y'all. It's really awesome, and I really appreciate it. I'll never stop working as hard as I can stand to work to try and help you guys catch more and bigger fish. That's what we will always be about. No matter how big or small this platform gets, it don't matter to me. We're going to do things the way we want to do them, and the way we want to do them is to try and help others catch as many fish as we can. Try to help people catch more and bigger fish and love our fellow man. We will always be about that here. That's what we will always do here on this channel. I'll promise that to you. So thank y'all so very much once again. We'll see you next time right here on your Lake Fork Guide.